Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 2 with the members are Alisa Isra Belinda, Anissa Purnamasari, Rizky Romadona, Rofik Yosaf, and Yulia Astika. Here we are about to present our material about review of literature, hypothesis, and theoretical framework. Well, let's just start with the first presenter.
Okay, we're gonna start with the definition of literature review. What is literature review? Literature review is a detailed review of existing literature related to the topic of a thesis or dissertation. In literature review, we talk about knowledge and findings from existing literature relevant to our topic. If we find gaps or conflicts in existing literature, we can also discuss this in our review, and, if applicable, how you plan to address these gaps or resolve these conflicts through your study. Next, how to review the related literature. The first one is we need to identify relevant literature. You can do this through the various resources, online and offline. And then, ensure you are saving all applicable resources because you will need to mention them in your paper. When going through the resources, make notes and identify key concepts of each resource to describe in the review. And then, before starting the review, determine how you want to organize the review. That is, whether you wish to discuss the resources by themes, dates, extent of relevance, and so on. Then, when writing the review, begin by providing the background and purpose of the review. Then, begin discussing each of the identified resources according to the way you decided to organize them. And finally, in the synthesis, you explain how the various concepts of each resource link with each other. You may decide to do this through a table or matrix. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, next I will explain about purpose of literature review. The purpose of a literature review is that a researcher or writer knows how the research will contribute to the scientific contribution of the topic or issue under study. This goal couldn't have been achieved if the author had never known anything that had been discussed in previous studies on related issues. Therefore, the authors need to read the previous studies. The readings are then reviewed. Next, benefit of literature review. There are 5 benefits of a literature review. The first, deepen knowledge of the research field. And the second, knowing the results of related research and those that have been carried out. And third, knowing the development of science in our chosen field. The fourth, clarify the research problem. And the last, knowing the latest methods proposed by researchers to solve a research problem. And also, the benefit of a literature review. The first, assessment of the current state of research on a topic. This is probably the most efficacious value of the literature review. Once a researcher has determined an area to work with for a research project, a search of relevant information search will help determine what is already known about the topic and how extensively the topic has already been researched. And the second, identification of the expert on a particular topic. A research will be able to assume that the particular author is an expert in the area and thus a key research for consultation in the current research to be undertaken. And third, identification of key questions about the topic that need further research. In many cases, a researcher may discover new angles that need further exploration by reviewing what has already been written on a topic. And the last, determination of methodologies used in past studies of the same or similar topics. It is often useful to review the types of study that previous researchers have launched as a means of determining what approaches may be of most benefit in further developing a topic.
I will explain about hypotheses. Hypotheses are temporary answers to the question of research which is theoretically considered most like and the highest degrees of truth. It can also be described as an educated prediction about the outcome research, and a hypothesis is meant to be tested. The guidelines in hypothesis formulation. The first thing is the hypothesis should be clear and brief. That means it should clearly and concisely state the expected relationship between the two variables and define the variable in operational measurable terms. And the second is hypothesis should be based on the past experiences or observation or on information gathered from your research. It should take into account the result of the experiment or observation mentioned in these articles. Next, hypothesis must be testable. It can be proven right or wrong depending on the outcome of the experiment. And the last thing is hypothesis should be state how, at the very least, two factors relate. And always remember that when an experiment fails, the hypothesis should not be changed to confirm the result of the experiment.
Now let's come to the types of hypotheses. There are two general types of hypotheses based on how they are stated. The first, alternative hypothesis. The working hypothesis is often also called the alternative hypothesis or HA. However, there are times when the hypothesis is symbolized by H1. So, this alternative hypothesis serves to state the relationship between variables x and y. This hypothesis can also show differences between the two groups. This hypothesis explains the relationship between variables or with other variables. For example, there is a relationship between the poverty rate and the availability of job vacancies. The second type of hypothesis is statistical hypothesis or the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is usually symbolized by HO. Another name for this hypothesis is the statistical hypothesis because it is often used in quantitative research that requires statistical calculations. In contrast to the hypothesis HO, there is no relationship or influence between other variables and other variables. For example, there is no relationship between a student's educational level and job opportunities.
Theoretical framework. The theoretical framework dwells on time-tested theories that embody the findings of numerous investigations on how phenomena occur. And here are the purposes of theoretical framework. The first one, it assists the researcher see clearly the variables of study. Second, it can endow with a general framework for data analysis. The last one, it is crucial in doing a research study using descriptive and experimental methods. And then, here are how to design theoretical framework. First, identify your key concepts. Second, evaluate and explain relevant theories. And the last one, show how your research fits in. So, that's all about our materials. We're waiting for your questions and thank you.